I hope that people reading or listening to me are not as tired of hearing it as I am of saying it. But it has to be said over and over because we are facing an enormous propaganda matrix, and we just need to keep repeating the truth in order to get it out. The other reason is that Americans are still under the collective delusion that when a face changes in the White House, that this signals some, profound change. And that's obviously not the case, but people are looking for tiny differences that they can use to be comfortable in the belief that they live in some sort of a democratic system. In fact, the same person in different guises has been president since Ronald Reagan. This is one of the great things that Chinua Achebe, Julius Nyerere, who said that, Americans talk about, they denounce this other countries for having a one-party system. The U.S. has a one-party system as well. It's just that with typical American extravagance, they happen to have two of them. And nowhere is this more obvious and blatantly evident as with the foreign policy sphere. This regime, cabal, whatever the pejorative terms the U.S. uses should be reflected back on itself. The Washington junta has been the same and following the same script basically since the end of World War II. I mean, certainly since Reagan. But it wasn't even communism that was such a threat. It was world domination. Someone else wanted to cut in on their action, and that is our job, as George Carlin famously said. Not the Nazis, not the Soviets, no one but us. And so, of course, the current U.S. mouthpiece is sounding off again on this same the same propaganda trajectory, and this is, I don't know what his name, I think it's Michael Carpenter. It doesn't really matter, it's just another member in good standing of the bullshit chorus. And they are still spouting what is essentially Hitler's Drang nach Osten, this push to the east, the idea that they want to subjugate, divide, and conquer Eurasia's peoples, polity, and economies. And there is that background to every little thing. Ukraine, sure. Ukraine is since 2014 has joined or has been joined by, it's hard to keep track, with Venezuela, Nicaragua, Honduras, Ecuador, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and now Kazakhstan as just another bead in the chain of American search for eternal global dominance and the pursuit of never-ending war to achieve that aim. They will always find a local grievance, people being angry about a tax hike or a fuel hike, or there are hundreds of grievances, and a lot of them are legitimate. Certainly, the claims against the oligarchs in Kazakhstan has some legitimacy, but the the real point is that the U.S. could care less. The U.S. could not give two shits about the people or their needs any more than they do at home, where they can't provide masks and tests 2 years into a pandemic that they just prefer to blame on the previous administration instead of providing for the needs of the people. So that's no different in Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Yemen, Syria, Libya, anywhere where they stick their nose. And in Ukraine, of course, they cozied up to a coalition of oligarchs and literal Nazis to push the Russians to the east, to put pressure on the Russians and move NATO eastward. And the audacity or stupidity, it's really hard to know of someone like, Blinken or Carpenter or any of these fools to say that, Russia is sounding the war drums. Guess what? They have troops in their country. There's 100,000 troops near the border. Yeah, that's where the enemy is. And they're still on their soil. NATO's troops are not on its soil, unless its soil is everywhere and anywhere it chooses to be. And that is the essence of the problem. There's nothing clearer, and there's nothing more concise than the demand that NATO not invite Ukraine to join it. And then Kazakhstan, then what? What? They want to have NATO troops on the borders of Russia and China for the sole purpose of containing them. And I don't know, the warnings come from everywhere that this is a really stupid idea. And now the Langley Boys are in charge. The CIA is running the whole show in Washington. There isn't even, the State Department is completely subservient to whatever whim the Langley Boys come up with, and they are determined to drag us into World War III. They want to soften up the American people to accept war with Russia and China or both. And, you get warnings even from something as silly or popular culture reference as The Princess Bride, where he says, well, the most important thing is never get involved in a land war in Asia. But the second most important is, and then he goes on with his spiel. But this is absolutely central to the very security and sanity and solidarity of both Russia and China. And they have made this completely clear. They can't. It's not even that they won't. They can't put up with any more American crap on their borders. Messing with their economies, messing with their, elections? Are you serious? The Americans are still talking about foreign interference in their elections? This is laughable. If it wasn't so scary and dangerous, these are ridiculous accusations that sociopaths typically use against their victims. You accuse them in the big lie of exactly the things of which you yourself are guilty. And you get away with it, especially if your country is populated by dumbed down children. This is one of the problems, is that the American people are too stupid or brainwashed to see our own country as tyrannical or imperialist or anti-democratic. Or a threat to the world, which everyone else seems to agree is the case. You don't have a victimless crime with American popular ignorance. It is not without consequence, and it's not for nothing that Democrats are in lockstep with Republicans with not a single peak of daylight between them on the issues of war and peace, on the issues of imperialism, and the exceptional nature of the American so-called democratic experiment. Their current chapter in this ongoing script is to say, China bad, Russia bad. Everything they do. China has spun straw into gold, the new Asian Rumpelstiltskin. But at what cost? Always. There's always some need to dump on whatever China is doing. And China and Russia are not stupid. And they increasingly are teaming up to fend off what is an existential threat. And then they have, you go into a local grievance and you tap into your decades-long interference through the National Endowment for Democracy or whatever, all the other alphabet soup of CIA front orgs that allow you to meddle in other people's civil society and make it ungovernable when they choose to. All these things come into play whenever there is a riot or an uprising or tensions or anything that you see in a foreign country that is outside the U.S. whose interests may not align with the U.S. government or whose policy may be tilted to gain an advantage, say a country on the border of Russia and China simultaneously, for example, then you have to go back to this history in this playbook. And yet they will still come out with these outrageous accusations. This DPRK doing this hypersonic missile test is profoundly destabilizing, says Antony Blinken. Okay, so there you have it. The U.S. is the arbiter and guarantor of stability in the world, right? Now, China just finished building the first high-speed rail from Laos, connecting Laos to China. An enormous and incredible, brilliant achievement. You know what they had to do first? They spent 6 months digging up and defusing U.S. bombs because more bombs were dropped on that area of the world by the U.S. than any other period in history. And they have the cojones to accuse anyone, anywhere else in the world, of destabilizing behavior. It's repulsive. It just, I know. I get tired of saying it, but you have to say it again and again and again because you're dealing with a childlike, a childlike mentality. Some of the names do matter. So if you go to Antony Blinken, and his name just always evokes for me wink and blink and a nod, which is a fairy tale, a child's lullaby. And it makes you realize that this is the thinking of children. There are no adults involved here. They use dreamlike, childlike logic in forcing their agenda and combine it with brute military strength to get their way, just like a toddler, an angry toddler. And both Russia and China are fending off huge invasions in the Taiwan Strait, the South China Sea, the Black Sea, NATO troops in Ukraine, threatening their borders all over, in Xinjiang, in Tibet, everywhere you can imagine. The U.S. is on full spectrum, full speed ahead attempt to conquer Russia and China. And you have to use those words because it's not peaceful coexistence, it's not democracy, it's not human rights, it is conquest that they are after. And if it's not set in stark terms, you always allow the propaganda ministry to come in and smooth things over, convince you that down is up, day is night, and the grass is bright red. we have to stand up to it and call it out. Bright red.